Welcome to Networks Professionals.
Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we are tackling something that is literally dominating headlines, confusing boardrooms, and, let's be honest, probably keeping a lot of developers awake at night. We're demystifying the insanely fast-moving, complex landscape of global AI regulations.
Okay, let's dive into this. You know, for the last few years, AI development has felt a lot like the Wild West, right? Move fast, break things, launch incredible models into the wild with barely any boundaries. Well, scratch that. The era of unregulated AI is officially over. Governments have stepped in, and the landscape has permanently shifted.
So what exactly is replacing that Wild West mentality? It's what we call binding AI regulations. Now, the core motivation here isn't to destroy artificial intelligence. Governments are actually trying to pull off this really delicate balancing act. They're designing policies specifically to prevent harm and build guardrails, without stifling the absolute wildfire of technological progress we're seeing right now.
To make sense of this massive global shift, we're going to hit 4 key areas today. First, the AI regulatory wave. Second, mapping global AI laws. Third, the 4 pillars of compliance. And finally, preparing your AI strategy. Let's jump right into part 1, the AI regulatory wave. Why the sudden, massive rush to regulate? Well, because the dangers of unregulated AI are very, very real. We're talking about massive data privacy breaches where sensitive personal info just gets swept up into model training. We're seeing systemic algorithmic bias making incredibly unfair decisions and facing totally new, scary security vulnerabilities. These are the exact catalysts forcing governments to step in as the solution.
Moving on to part 2, mapping global AI laws. Let's take a look at the where.
When we take a tour around the globe, we see different but heavily overlapping approaches. The EU AI Act relies on risk-based classification, literally banning certain harmful practices entirely. Over in South Korea, their basic AI law lays out comprehensive legal requirements for AI models. Then in India, their IT rules impose strict due diligence specifically for synthetically generated information. And in Singapore, the IMDA focuses on upfront risk and technical controls for agentic AI. It's a huge, diverse map, for sure, but everyone is heading in the exact same general direction.
Let's zoom in on Europe for a second, because the EU framework is a massive benchmark right now. They classify AI using a really strict hierarchy of risk. At the very top, you have unacceptable risk, which is just flat out banned. No way, not happening. Under that, you have high, limited, and minimal risk tiers. Your obligations completely depend on where your tool lands on this ladder. And getting it wrong? Oh, it is unbelievably costly. Fines for non-compliance can hit up to 35 million euros, or 7% of a company's global annual turnover. That is absolutely huge.
And this brilliantly illustrates how different regions are tackling their own specific concerns. Look at India versus Singapore. India's approach heavily targets the information side, amending IT rules to regulate synthetically generated information to fight deepfakes. But Singapore, they're looking at the agents. They are applying futuristic technical controls for advanced, autonomous AI systems that act on their own. 2 totally different focuses, both super important.
All right, moving to part 3, the 4 pillars of compliance. To save you from absolute cognitive overload, looking at all these international laws, I want to introduce you to the Rule of 4. Because despite the massive geographic distances and different cultural approaches, almost all governments are demanding these exact same 4 pillars: risk management, transparency, accountability, and data protection. Master these 4 core areas, and you are basically building the blueprint for global compliance. Let's break them down. Pillar number 1 is risk management. So the crucial point is continuous. This isn't just a one-and-done, check-the-box exercise. Organizations are now legally required to continuously assess their models for vulnerabilities, biases, and systemic risks. The evaluation process has to be ongoing long after the product actually launches. Pillar number 2 is transparency. Under these new rules, developers have to make it glaringly obvious when content is AI-generated. This means embedded watermarking and super clear, unmistakable labeling of synthetic content. The whole idea of passing off an AI creation as human-made without disclosing it? Yeah, those days are totally over. The laws demand that users know exactly what they are interacting with. The third pillar is accountability and oversight. You can't just let an algorithm run wild and say, oops, the machine did it when things go wrong.
These policies mandate distinct human oversight. You have to keep a human in the loop, and this is especially crucial for automated decision-making, like recruitment or hiring algorithms, where an AI's decision can literally alter the trajectory of a person's life.
Our final pillar is data protection, which brings us to an absolutely incredible term: training data hygiene. I know, it kind of sounds like you need to take out a tiny toothbrush and start brushing your algorithm's teeth, but actually it means serious business. It requires strict adherence to privacy parameters to make sure you have clean data and to prevent any unauthorized exposure of private info during the model's training phase.
And that brings us to our final section, Part 4, Preparing Your AI Strategy.
So if you're involved in AI deployment or development, what's next? Well, first, do a deep dive into the EU Artificial Intelligence Act compliance timelines. You really do not want to miss a staggered deadline. Next, I highly recommend reviewing the OECD guidelines for multinational enterprises. It is a fantastic benchmark for responsible business conduct. And finally, you've got to actively assess your current internal systems against these new transparency and accountability frameworks we just talked about.
Which brings us to the ultimate question you really have to ask yourself right now. Are your internal systems truly ready for the new era of AI accountability? The Wild West is closed, the guardrails are up, and the future absolutely belongs to those who innovate responsibly. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I really encourage you to take these insights back to your teams today. Until next time, keep learning and stay curious.
Thanks for watching.